So technical difficulties.
Okay, but we're still,
Why don't each of you take one
Well, it's a bit windy.
yeah.
More technical difficulties.
you want to move the no, you don't want to.
Let's try one more time.
Sure,
Wait,
of
wait.
course.
They need to be burned down.
down.
There's a wick.
We're on standby.
Sorry.
No sorry necessary.
Oh, there you go. There we go.
Just let it
Damn.
burn until it one more people.
You're gonna burn yourself on.
Kind of like camping over at your house.
Wait, let's try. We got fresh candles here.
Oh, look at that.
Oh,
That's
There we
better.
go.
Yeah,
yay.
more of a wick.
I think you got it now.
There we go.
Are we
Alright.
ready to give it a go? Let's
We're
bring it.
ready.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
will do our hands and you guys sing the blessing. Baruch. Ready?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehalikner shel Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Wow. Okay, Eden, we have definitely started the celebrations at your house. I can feel it from here. So let's turn in our Siddur. Where if you were following a Siddur, it'd be 139, but otherwise we've got our slides because of Rick Snyder. La 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 חדדי, la 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 לקראת כלה, la 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 פני שבת, פני שבת לקבל, la 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 חדדי, la 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 לקראת כלה, la 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 פני שבת, פני שבת לקבל. שמור וזכור דיבור אחד ישריענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ושם הוא תפארת בלי תחילה. La 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 חדדי, la 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 לקראת כלה, la 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 פני שבת, פני שבת לקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, יהי מקור הברכה, לראש מקדם משוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה, and we try to really shake off whatever was sad or annoying or troubling of the past week, whatever was making our hearts heavy. Let that fold off and roll off and roll off so we can sing. Boi v'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'simcha uv'tzola, toch emunei am segula, boi chala. She's in. Please be seated if you were standing. We turn in our slide to Mizmor Shir, or page 140. Mr. Eden Cohen, are you there ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on. I just need to find the page. Sorry.
That's okay. It's on your slide.
I knew that. Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat Tov Lehodot LaAdonai Uzamer Leshimcha Elyon Uzamer Leshimcha Elyon Lehagid Baboker Hasdecha Ve'emunatcha Baleilot Ale Asur Ve'ale Navel Ale Higayon Bachinur Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat Tov Lehodot LaAdonai Uzamer Leshimcha Elyon Uzamer Leshimcha Elyon Kisimachtani Adonai B'folecha V'ma'aseh Yadecha Aranen Magadlu Ma'asecha Adonai Ma'od Amku Machshvotecha Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat Tov Lehodot LaAdonai Uzamer Leshimcha Elyon Uzamer Leshimcha Elyon.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Eden. So I feel particularly open to the Shabbat angels tonight. Shalom Aleichem, 142. Malachei Elyon, mi melech malachei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Boachem leshalom, malachei hashalom, malachei Elyon, mi melech malachei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Barchuni l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei Elyon, mi melech malachei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Seichem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei Elyon, mi melech malachei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Here's another window. What we see depends mainly on what we look for. I think we have Chatzi Kaddish after that one. There we go. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, b'amad yivrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon, uv'chayedacho be'Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, uvizmahan kariv, vayimeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach, la'alam ul'alme almaya. Yitbarach, yitbarach v'yishabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitchoma v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal, shemei dekudesha brichu, le'ela min kol b'chata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, tamiran b'yama, v'yimeru amen. If you're able to stand, la 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 la. Hamivora. Please be seated. Rumi taught, stop the words now. Open the window in the center of your chest and let the spirits fly in and out. Now, when you look at this slide, Rick and I were speaking about it earlier. Does it look like the early morning when the last night turns into day? Or is it about 4 o'clock when it starts to turn into evening? I'm not sure that it matters, but because what we are recognizing is that it rolls. It's about recognizing. This morning I had the chance to take a very early morning walk, and the birds were chattering, and only now and then did I find that I was listening because I was so busy listening to the chatter in my head. So this is just another opportunity to recognize when change happens, when night turns to day, day turns to night, and to let in and quiet the chatter in our head. Roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. Becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light, night becomes day, day turns to night. Let's continue with Ahavat Olam. And it's our Siddur, page 150. Oh, we'll go back. There we go. Let's take a look at the English for a moment. Everlasting love, you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot and laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we'll meditate on your laws and commandments and rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha ahavta Amcha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadita Hakein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochbeinu Kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha U'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Ki hem chayeinu Ve'orach yameinu Uvahem negeh yomam v'layla Negeh yomam v'layla Ve'ahavatcha al tasir Mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev amo Yisrael Ohev amo Yisrael. Please stand for Shema, page 152. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. You sign Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu. Please be seated. Eden, you're on for V'ahavta, page 154. Mr. Barmitz, there you go. Go for it.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטפטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Adonai Elohechem.
Awesome. Eden, thank you. For the reading that's next, I'd like to invite Henry to read. He's saying, what? I was just taking a sip of water. So Yakir, Danielle, can you read this reading? It's there it is. And before you read it, we take a look at that those birds. There's one of them that has a different perspective. And that's what we're looking for, especially on this Shabbat. Thank you.
Disturb us, Adonai. Ruffle us from our complacency. Make us satisfied with peace of ignorance, quietude which arises from a shunning of the horror, defeat, bitterness, and the poverty, physical and spiritual, of humans. Shock us, Adonai. Deny to us the false Shabbat, which gives us the delusions of satisfaction amid a world of war and hatred. Wake us, O God, and shake us from the sweet and sad poignancies rendered by half-forgotten melodies and rubric prayers of yesteryear. Make us know that the border of sanctuary is not the border of living, and the walls of your temples are not shelters from the winds of truth, justice, and reality. Disturb us, O God, and vex us. Let not your Shabbat be a day of torpor and slumber. Let it be a time to be stirred and spurred to action. Baruch atah Adonai Mechadesh HaShabbat.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you. So we take that energy up, back one. There you go. Ya la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 mi chamocha bali madonai mi chamocha nedar bakodesh no just going to do that part of this chant. The text that you see there, Eden, should look familiar to you because Eden will be chanting that tomorrow morning. That's the Saturday prayers. Ya la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Let's move to Hashkivenu. And the slight background of that slide, you see some faces. And we don't know who those people are, but you can tell just slightly that they need shelter. So when we sing Hashkivenu, it's not only for us, but it's for all of us. Those who we know, those who we don't know. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu, the Shalom, the Hamidenu Malkeinu Lechayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us daily wrong from right. Amen. 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 Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat. For those of you with a Siddur, page 162. Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam. Berit olam beini uvein bnei Israel oti leolam. Ki sheshet yamim masa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinaf Shabbat vayinavash Shabbat vayinavash. So we enter Tefillah. First part we chant together, and then there will be a section for silent reflection. So if you're able, please join me in your Siddur. It's page 164. Adonai, sivatai tiftach, ufi yagita hilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, Elion, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol. זוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מחכה לחיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, לשני עפר, מי כמוך בר גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישוען, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יעלוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Your name, you are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. Please be seated. So I ask you to join this character here who is sitting quietly and peacefully, possibly looking at the northern lights. Just let's take a few moments of our own reflection, breathing out whatever's challenging, breathing in the peace. One more back. There's a ritzay somewhere. There's no ritzay? Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Lechol hashalom, shalom rav, Yisrael amcha, tasim leolam. Shalom rav, Yisrael amcha, tasim leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol leilu v'chol sha'a b'shlomecha. Shalom rav Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom rav Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. So, dear friends, I ask you to think about your loved ones who you're praying for on this Shabbat, for whom you would like to offer a refuah shlema, ask God for complete healing. If you can unmute yourself and say those names, then we can all pray with you.
David Mitchell and Lois Brown.
Nina Renee Fleischman,
Lynn and Mark Snyder,
Tony Maynard, Bill McDonald, Stanley Carter,
Robin Gillette,
I'm not going to be able to read that. You turn up the light. Go turn up the
I'm gonna turn on my light here.
Barbara Stern, Our Country,
Joanne.
Rifa'enu Adonai v'nei rafeh, v'hoshienu v'nei vashecha, el karov lechol korav, ach karov l're'av yisho. We pray for healing of the body. We pray for healing of the soul, for strength of flesh and mind and spirit. We pray to once again be whole. Rifana, oh please heal us now. Refuat ha-nefesh, refuat ha-guf, refuat shlema, heal us now. Hoshia et amecha, uvorech et nachlatecha, urem v'nasim et ha'olam. Misheberach avotenu, Misheberach imotenu, Ana Adonai Hoshiana. We pray for healing of our people. We pray for healing of the land and peace for every race and nation, every child, every woman, every man. Rifana, oh please heal us now. Rifuat ha-nefesh, Rifuat ha-guf, Rifuat shlema, heal us now. Heal us now. Heal us now. We're queuing up Susan Solars. And I'm going to ask you to move the slides slightly so that I could read the page, Rick. Can you move the people up just for a sec? In a sec. Technology is amazing most of the time. So Susan will be introducing our guest speaker. I am so delighted that he and Esther are in the room to celebrate Shabbat with us. So Susan, if you would like to introduce our beloved Charlie Varano, he will come right up, he promises, and share with us how to understand poverty. One must understand plenty. So Susan's going to say things and you can come right in.
Look right in there?
Yeah, that's right. Wait for
Sorry, I was on mute. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Charlie Varano. Dr. Varano is a professor of sociology at California State University, Sacramento, where he joined the faculty in 1998. Dr. Varano received his PhD from the Department of Sociology at the University of California, San Diego. His dissertation was published as an award-winning book, Forced Choices, Class, Community, and Worker Ownership. His areas of expertise are education, social inequalities, urban life, and work in organizations. In the early 2000s, Dr. Varano was a major contributor in a founding interdisciplinary group of faculty who developed the first social justice course to be taught at CSU Sacramento that continues to be offered through a variety of departments in the College of Social Sciences and Interdisciplinary Studies. Dr. Varano is the director of the Labor Studies Program and faculty coordinator of the Sociology Internship Program. He enjoys teaching undergraduate and graduate courses and conducting research. Over the years, Dr. Varano has mentored many graduate students from underrepresented backgrounds who have completed master's theses on social justice issues. He is currently conducting research on teamwork and medical specialty units and on worker death and injury and collective memory. Most recently, he has co-authored an academic book, When Older Women Speak, Aging, Emotional Distress, and the Self. So with that introduction, we are delighted to have Dr. Charlie Varano. Thank you very much for joining us and being with us.
Thank you, Susan. I've never been introduced like that before, so I'm very happy to hear about that. Thank you so much. And before I start, I would like to say on behalf of Esther and the Varano Clutch, Mazel Tov, Eden. We're very happy for you, and hope you enjoy your big day tomorrow. It's a wonderful thing. So I am honored to come and speak before you. Is that good, Rick? Am I talking in there right? Okay. This is really a wonderful opportunity to share with you some thoughts about something that I've been thinking about for 60 years, since I was a kid. And I first noticed poor people around me and wondered about them and asked questions about their lives. And then I guess I started to try and understand it and went to graduate school. I've been studying it at least since the 1970s. I don't know that I have an answer, but I know a lot of people that have put forth some, and I have them right here. As a good professor, I always take my notes with me, and they're full of sources and all the rest, and I've even outlined it. But in the interest of time, I'm going to try and be as brief as possible to open it up for questions if anyone has them. The title I picked, To Understand Poverty, One Must Understand Plenty, really is meant to convey that poverty is somewhat of a social construction. What we call in sociology is social construction. And we understand it oftentimes in contrast to other states of social condition. And I think in the United States as well as elsewhere, to really make sense of poverty, we need to understand plenty alongside of it. And I think that I'll hope to make that point throughout my talk. I've got 4 parts to this talk, and I'll let you know what they are now. The first 2 are what social scientists distinguish when thinking about poverty, and that is what we call absolute poverty and what we call relative deprivation. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about both of those. And then the third part of my talk, I'd like to kind of jump off of relative deprivation into a growing concern. Interestingly enough, probably more so than poverty these days, and that is social inequality, not only here in the United States, but globally. And then I'll finish with what is to be done. How might we address some of these issues? By absolute poverty, what sociologists and social scientists mean is really the bare minimum for survival. And we measure things like caloric intake. We measure things like, is there indoor plumbing, or do people have to go outside? We look at sewage systems. We look at things like child mortality and morbidity. Just basic measures of, how close are people to death, and how close are they to barely surviving? That's what we usually consider absolute poverty. And we all know what that is. We've seen it. We've seen it on television. We usually associate it with Africa, let's say, starving children because of a drought. We see it when we drive through Sacramento on the sides of our streets, and we look at the homeless. And so we know it exists out there, and it's frustrating, especially in this day and age. In the United States, it really became more newsworthy, if you will, during the Great Depression, in the work of John Steinbeck, for example, Grapes of Wrath, or James Agee, who looked at Alabama sharecroppers and wrote a book called Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. In 1961, Michael Harrington wrote a book called The Other America, in which he really was critical of the United States for coming out of a period of plenty in the 1950s, yet still having pockets of deep, deep poverty in rural America. These accounts, if you will, of poverty led to a number of efforts to try and alleviate it. Certainly, many of us know of and were benefited by the New Deal, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but the New Deal didn't reach everybody, especially African Americans, Mexican Americans. But Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty did reach those groups. And we saw tremendous gains and tremendous improvement. Since the 1960s, poverty has hovered between 11 and 15% roughly. We'd like it to go down to 0%. I don't think we want to go backwards, but we have a lot of work to do, especially compared to other countries in the world. But it is stabilized. I have a couple of bits of data. The poverty rate dropped from 22% roughly in 1959 to 11% by 1973. And by 2017, we're back around 12.3%. Poverty is still higher than in the industrial democracies of Western Europe, for example. I'll give you a quick idea here. In France and the United States have roughly the same childhood poverty rate, 27% before income transfers and social spending. After you calculate that in, France's goes down to 7.5%, and we dip a little bit to 21.9%. You can see this among many countries. Social spending really does matter. Poverty is still skewed largely to minorities, Blacks, Latinx, Native American communities. Poverty is much higher among female single-headed households than among married couples, for example. And poverty has become more urban over the last 50 years. It used to be a rural issue. It's become far more urban. And we make this distinction in the United States. I don't know that I've seen it made elsewhere, or I've just not seen it, or I'm not gone to enough places, but we talk about the what's called the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. And the deserving poor are those who, you know, we think, oh, they just fell on bad times, or, you know, the illness in the family, or they lost a job. And the undeserving poor, we consider lazy and always looking to go on the dole. And where this distinction came from, I can cite some people, but it's an insidious distinction, I believe, because what it does is it tends to reinforce stereotypes. It tends to be used as an ideological weapon to reduce social spending and to reduce our efforts to get that 11, 12% poverty down to 0%. But we still haven't overcome that. And that's certainly a big problem in moving forward in trying to alleviate the poverty we have. But we've made great strides. Once again, child mortality rates in 1960 were 30 per 1,000. Today, they're down to 6.8 per 1,000. Based on what we call the consumption index rather than income, the poor consume a lot more now than they ever did in the United States. The poor can afford to buy almost 1/4 more than they could in 1950. The poor had relatively no access in 1960 to air conditioning, dishwashers, clothes dryers. About half of the poor didn't have a car. By 2009, over 80% of the poorest quintile in the United States has air conditioning. That matters, especially in areas of the country that reach the hundreds and beyond. By 2009, 68% had clothes dryers. Again, you can see the measurements are these very fundamental kinds of technologies, if you will. 40% had dishwashers. I remember when I was a child, my grandmother washed her clothes with this rolling pin and this big tub. And she went outside and did them on the line. A lot of us do that now. We think it smells better than the rest. She had to do it back then. 75% own cars. So we've made a lot of strides. And this is where relative deprivation comes in. I remember my grandmother saying during the Great Depression, she said, Charlie, we were all poor. We didn't know anything else, you know, so we didn't feel poor. You know, when she looked up and down the streets in Pittston, Pennsylvania, everyone was in the same situation. And it made a difference in how they approached their lives and how they thought of themselves in terms of being poor. Today, with media, broadcasting, wealth and privilege, and the rich and famous, and even in the urban centers where poverty is sometimes cheek and jowl by privilege and affluence. Relative poverty becomes much more important. You know, how do we see ourselves relative to other people? How do we compare ourselves relative to other people? What do we think of who we are, what we're worth? Our dignity comes into play. So I think relative deprivation is perhaps a larger problem than absolute poverty. I'm not saying that you know, survival isn't an issue, but relative deprivation can lead people to sometimes act in ways that are maybe detrimental to themselves and to others because they're angry and they're frustrated. And in the United States, at least since the 1970s, we have experienced, this is the third point, growing inequality in this country. Inequality really rivals the Gilded Age of the late 1800s. And most scholars and social scientists are writing about inequality now, not as much poverty. You know, the first alert of this was in the early 1980s and by a man named Paul Blumberg, you know, Inequality in an Age of Decline. That was followed by Kevin Phillips, a Nixon strategist, by the way, who wrote a book called The Politics of Rich and Poor. And wherever I look, when I'm teaching my course, there's more books coming out. And the trend is rather startling because we tend to think of, you know, the division of inequality between the rich and the poor. And increasingly, according to all the models that I've seen, it's really a race between the super rich, and that's the 100th of the top 1%, and everybody else. And I'm not going to cite the income figures, but they're pretty astronomical. We're talking of incomes of millions to billions of dollars a year. And what that's doing is really changing the social landscape, changing the economic landscape, and certainly the political landscape. As more and more of the middle class in the United States, those who many people feel make democracy possible, are starting to slide systematically, gradually, without reversal since the 1970s into the working poor, while a smaller and smaller group of Americans control the vast wealth in this country. And there's a lot of things to look at. Me personally, my own classes tend to focus on what that division among the very top means. Sociologically, it's very interesting. But secondly, what it means for the people who were in the middle to suddenly now find themselves sliding down closer to those 11 to 12% who are poor. And one of the things I think may happen is that deserving, undeserving distinction may not be as strong as more people who used to make that distinction find themselves in the situation they once were critical of. What is to be done? As Robert Reich said, former labor secretary under President Clinton, you don't have to look very far to find the answer to what we should do. It's in our own backyard. It's on our own history. In fact, the gains we made to alleviate the poverty that was pretty significant in the 1950s would be a good place to start. We've done it before. We may not do it the way that Western Europe does it, okay? We can go there and talk about that. In fact, they're talking about some of that right now in Congress. But we have made strides to alleviate inequality in this country. Believe it or not, when President Eisenhower was in office, the top tax rate was 90%. It's now under 40%. Richard Nixon once called for a living wage for all Americans. He's a Republican. So we've changed our tune in terms of what we think are the solutions. And I think we've come to the solutions in the past. We may want to return and kind of revisit those stories. And we might find some good answers to solving that problem. I think to do that, we have to avoid the sticker shock message that many naysayers conveniently give us in a land of plenty. The United States addressed the problem of poverty coming out of a period of plenty in the 1950s, not only here, but in Europe. We now live in a land of plenty, and we can move from that land of plenty to alleviate the growing working poor. But usually what's happened to make that happen, to find the political will to make that happen, is the United States has looked to social movements. We can go back to the, suffragettes, we can go back to the abolitionists, we can go back to the labor movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement. We're a land of social movements. And unlike other countries that usually have coalition politics, our two-party system tends to be pushed from below to make the things happen that we want. And I think those social movements have to push our elected representatives to heed the better angels of our nature. There are some more specific solutions that I've been reading about lately, trying to keep up with things as much as possible because a lot of folks are trying to come up with them. I'm happy to discuss that with folks in more detail if you have any questions, but I'd like to thank you all for giving me the few minutes to share my thoughts on this issue and maybe give you guys something to think about. Rick.
I have a question. You had mentioned several books that sort of documented or were able to delineate where we were at in terms of poverty, in terms of bringing it to public awareness. How important are still pictures to that? Things like what Dorothea Lange did during the Depression. How important?
And Agee did the same thing. I mean, I think images and pictures can be profound. I mean, I think your question is really important because when we look at the pictures of starving children from Africa, we usually reach for our pocketbooks and we try to help out. Or when we see what's happening down in Haiti, for example, the images of that move us to try and contribute in any way we can. And there's a lot of that message in the United States today regarding poverty, globally, as well as in our own backyard. So I think that's an important way to address the problem. I think what those images don't help us do is come to the solution. How do we change those images and make them a vestige of the past rather than why do we keep seeing them again and again? And but it does alert us, and that's I think why relative poverty is so critical. People see and they compare, and but they don't always. It doesn't always help them articulate a design for change or a way of thinking about that. Anybody on the screen there? I'm looking at the screen. I'll take emails even down the road if you want, and I'll be happy to send you some of what I've been looking at if you are interested.
Oh, Charlie, can you hear me?
I hear you, but I don't know who you are.
This is Nick Alexander.
Oh, hi, Nick. How are you?
Good,
hi, Sharon.
Hi.
And I wanted to ask you, how is your experience in reform with Reform Judaism? How has that affected your thinking regarding injustice in our society?
Well, my experience with Beth Shalom, Congregation Beth Shalom, Rabbi Nancy, actually even preceding that when we had the children in Shalom school, I was always struck by the continuous and consistent reference to the inequities and injustices of the world. It wasn't avoided, it wasn't ignored, it was central to the teachings. And I've always felt reaffirmed by that and felt that we're in this together in a way that I don't always feel at school. I mean, I feel that in academia among some of my colleagues, not always in my classroom, but certainly when I step into Temple, I feel that way. I feel very much a part of an answer as opposed to trying to, I don't know, change minds. But I must say, it's more important to change minds, I think, at this point, than to be among those who, you find comfort with. I mean, we need to convince others. We need to convey that message beyond our comfort zone, so to speak. And that means talking to people who we may disagree with. Susan.
Sharon Alexander.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I taught in the School of Education at Sac State, and I wonder how we as an institution, an academic institution, can participate in what we see, for instance, in education that is class driven, and how we don't. It would seem to me, I'm retired, but it seems to me we should have a role, at least in the schools around us, the elementary and the public schools around us. And I don't see that we do. We talk a lot in classrooms, but I don't see the work that we're doing, we're thinking about and studying, move into the neighborhoods that we live in. For instance, in Elk Grove, in an article recently, they're expelling so many African-American children. We know better than that. Why aren't we participating in a better way of solving problems besides marking these children in ways that will influence their futures? You're still in the system. I'm not, but I'm watching it.
I like the word you use. It's a system, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the, I think one of the answers to your question is everybody's involved in the race to the top. When the bottom's falling out of the boat, you climb to the top, and that's what everyone's doing. All of us are doing this. All of us. And education and educational systems are complicit in this. One of the people that you might find interesting to read is Daniel Markovits from Yale, wrote a book called The Meritocracy Trap, in which he argues quite persuasively, although I find a few places I'd like to call him on, that our schools are actually engines of reproducing inequality. So if he's right, there's no need to stop doing what we're doing for those kids. I mean, the system's geared against them. And one of his solutions is to stop doing that and start with education and open education to everyone rather than gearing it towards the select few. There's a lot more to go with that, and you well know that race to the top. Because that race to the top basically creates this, what he calls this hyper-educated technical elite who warrant the major incomes that they do at the expense of the middle income jobs that used to dominate our economy. We need only go back to the 1960s, and my dad, who didn't get a college degree, was able to, on a single wage, raise a family, okay? That was widespread. That wasn't unique, that was widespread. We don't have that now. We don't have that now because our educational institutions do not train the student body for those kinds of jobs. Those jobs don't exist. And the second prong of his answer, besides opening the schools, is recreating those middle skilled jobs that provided not only a middle-class income, but also a step for the people in poverty to get up to. Folks in poverty, there's nothing to climb up to. I mean, the whole idea of social mobility is kind of a myth. So I hear what your question is, and I think you're very right, Shen. I think you're very right.
Susan, that's okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, thank you, Charlie. Thank you for your excellent talk. Actually, in response to Sharon, I know that there are some movements to restorative justice, you know, in the schools, and I know some people involved with that, and I can talk to you outside of this context about that a little bit. But actually, my question is, my observation and my reading leads me to believe that there's, my impression, unless I misunderstood, is you seem to be somewhat optimistic in the trends. And I feel, I'm not sure I feel that way in this country. And my understanding, and I'm not an academic, is that there's growing inequalities, and certainly over the past maybe 20 years or so. I know Sasha, what's his name? I'm sure you know who he is, UC Davis. Do you know who I'm talking about, Charlie? Had documented the growing inequalities due to our tax structures. And certainly as we look in our cities, we see greater and greater numbers of people who are homeless, which to me indicates that we're not taking care of, you know, of our poor. We're not, that this inequality is getting larger, it's not getting better. And I'm looking to, and I don't know what the solution is. I'm thinking of tax structures, I'm thinking of housing opportunities, and I'm wondering your views on that as we look around us in Sacramento and other major cities in our country.
I plead guilty to being an optimist. I don't know any other way to be in terms of this. Otherwise, I would be, you know, throwing up my hands and not even looking for answers. I mean, one of the things I've learned sociologically is no matter how many times people lose in the struggle, they keep struggling. So I tend to focus on that and applaud that and build on that. So my optimism over the improvements of poverty in this country are meant to convey that if we did it there, we can do it elsewhere, and we just need the will. So I completely join you in wanting that, you know, more progressive tax code, but I think that has to be really pushed, and we need to convince people that it's possible to do and to move in that direction. I would say just really quickly before I'm gonna go back to my seat, I think two really important measures that we could implement to make a big stab in not only poverty, but inequality is universal health care, which has been supported since the 1950s. I see no reason we can't do that. And universal pre-K. The most important education is when they are under 6 years old, because if they don't get it then, I don't get to see them when they come to my classroom. So those are the two things I'd like to leave you with. I want to thank Rabbi for giving me the opportunity to talk, and thank you all. And Mazel Tov, Eden, way to go. Bye.
We are so blessed with your talk, Charlie. It's very clear. And with all the serious stuff that you talk about, you do have optimism. And so that makes it more possible to absorb, right? And thank you. You know, it is, once again, that we have to look outside the windows of this place, of this sanctuary. And I also really appreciate the last two things that you said about universal health care and making sure that our youngest children have the opportunity to really get a good start in learning. And thank you. Thank you. For our Social Justice Committee with Susan and Lucy as our chair people, thank you very much for promoting social justice. Not only is it part of our Neshama school and what we talk about, but that we dedicate once a month a very, very focused talk. And I am very grateful, and thank you, Charlie. Folks, before we read the announcements, I really want to honor those who have served our country. As Veterans Day was this week, I just want to thank all of you who have served in any capacity and to offer a prayer for our country. You don't have the words in front of you, but that's all right. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honor those who have died in defense of our highest ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May all our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen. I would like to now invite Elliot to share with us what's coming up in our wonderful community. Shabbat Shalom to both Rhea and to Elliot.
Right.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And what a wonderful week it has been. So let's start with Saturday on November 13th. Torah study is at 9 o'clock with Rabbi Nancy and Bob Bennett. We'd like to have more of you there. It's a wonderful opportunity. Sunday, 11:14, and the Shama is in session. When you drop off the kiddies, take the opportunity to visit the CBS gift shop for all your Hanukkah needs. Drop off a turkey and other non-perishable items for the Sierra Arden Food Bank. CBS is proud to continue the Thanksgiving turkey drive tradition for the Sierra Arden Neighborhood Food Closet. It is a wonderful CBS tradition of giving that in November, we collect our members frozen turkeys and Thanksgiving fixings for the food closet. Volunteers are needed and drop-off dates are Sunday, November 14th, 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. Sunday, November 21st, 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. Friday, November 19th at 7 p.m. Shabbat services are led by Sherry and David Meyer. So those are all dates to put on your calendar. Hanukkah is coming. Visit our website. You know what that website is. CBS is on the web to order from a list of delicious items for your Hanukkah needs, including latkes, soups, salads, gelt, and of course, sufganiyot, along with sponsorship opportunities. Join us next Thursday on 11/18 at 7 p.m. on Zoom for November's board meeting. We are pleased to welcome members of the Sacramento Sheriff's Department to lead us in a discussion about security and risk management as we begin to open up for the in-person services. This is a big save the date opportunity coming up as well. Join us for an afternoon tea on Sunday, February 13th, and that's going to be in the year 2022. My God. 2022 for a centennial celebration honoring our beloved Carrie Cohen. Stay tuned for more details and good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you very much. Well done. And of course, our shout out for all of you to join us on Zoom tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. as Eden's called to Torah as bar mitzvah. My friends, we turn now to page to Aleinu, and for those of you in the sanctuary, page 586. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו כחול המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומשה בקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו, בגופי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, מלכנו ופסולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעתנו להשבותה אל לבבך. כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחתנו, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Please be seated. The Kaddish prayer will be on page 598. We remember with much love those who have passed within the 11 months. Emma Ronquillo Nalangan, Bob Unger, Bill Jenkins, Linda Clark, Sergeant Beryl Hadera Shmuley, Raquel Kagan de Apasoa, Dennis Mathit, Sandra Jeffrey, Florenciano Carbajal, Nancy Ann Sutter, Charlie Hilty, Murray Fink, Maria Pellegrino Eisner, Sheila Sugarman, Nancy Norton Fleischman, Raul Saavedra, Leroy Davis, Sarah Everard, Christine Varano, Ann Kilcrease, Gloria Dottie, Susan Blum, Jerome Marvin Hyman, Ivan Krakowski. And we remember the yard sites of Mayor Actor Esther Babbitts, Louise Baer, Rose Bailey, Robert Duncan, Sophia A. Eisner, Milton Guinness, Connie Kessler, Bernard Kuhn, Milton Lewis, Golda Meir, Harry J. Orla, Gabriel Schutzingle, Jaime Siegel. Are there any other yard sites or recent deaths in our community tonight? Please unmute yourself to say their names.
Barry Katz.
Bob Tardif,
Corey Jones.
We include in our remembering on this night, especially those who served our country and lost their lives in service. of our highest ideals. Zichronam Livracha, may all their memories be for a blessing. If you're able, please stand as we say the Kaddish prayer together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chaye chon v'yomei chon u'v'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudesha brichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru. Amen. Please be seated. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Amen. May the one who makes peace in high places bring peace to all of us. So, dear friends, if you could come close to some fruit of the vine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'atzavanu v'shabbat kodsho v'avav ratzon hilchilanu zikaron l'maaseh bereishit ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta v'yotanu kidasha mikol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha v'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. L'chaim. You know, we're used to just chanting this lovely prayer, but it says in this lovely prayer to remember leaving Egypt. So in our lovely fruit of the vine prayer, we are remembering what it was to be without and affirming that idea that we should all be with. So may the message that Charlie shared with us be our take home. So check out the challah. It's a Vayetze challah, and it's the image of Jacob's ladder. And I tried to do that at home this past Shabbat, or when I was baking my challah. So this is my effort of the ladder challah. Just want to show my I think that next year, God willing, I'll do it better. But here we go. Let there be challah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom. Thank you, Rick Snyder. Thank you, dear Charlie. Thank you, Esther and Joel. And Mazel Tov, Mr. Eden. And to everybody, Shabbat shalom. Thank you for joining us.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Heidi, do your thing. I love it.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Okay.
Okay.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi Nancy.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Rega. Shabbat shalom, Bob and Holly. Shabbat shalom, Susan. Shabbat shalom, Henry. Shabbat shalom, Sharon and Nick. Shabbat shalom, Linda. Shabbat shalom, Terry. Shabbat shalom, Roy.
They don't like it?
Shabbat shalom, Raina. Shabbat shalom, Ria and Elliot. Shabbat shalom, Lucy. Shabbat shalom, Louisette. Shabbat shalom, Esther. Shabbat shalom. I don't know what your first name is, Mrs. Huckabee.
Donna.
What? Donna? Donna. Shabbat shalom, Vanessa. Shabbat shalom, Val. Yay.
Yay, Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Susan. Shabbat shalom, Susan. Shabbat shalom, Heidi. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and Rabbi Nancy.
Thank you.
Shabbat is here. Shabbat is here. Aren't you glad that Shabbat is here? Candles burn bright on a Friday night. Aren't you glad that Shabbat is here? Shabbat shalom to Rick Snyder. Shabbat shalom to Esther Varano. Shabbat shalom to Charlie. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat is here. Shabbat is here. Aren't you glad that Shabbat is here? Candles burning bright on a Friday night. Aren't you glad that Shabbat is here? Shabbat shalom, everybody. Thanks for being with us.
Shabbat shalom.